Hello and welcome to another very exciting BlenderBranch.com tutorial. I'm Kenan Prophet, and this is the secrets of realistic trees in Blender. That's right, we're tackling the very popular subject of CGI trees. And I know you might be thinking, another tree tutorial, haven't we seen enough of these? Well, this one is different in the sense that we're not using any add-ons. So we're gonna model this tree from scratch, and it doesn't take that much extra time, and I hope to convince you by the end of this tutorial that it's really the best way to get truly realistic trees. So unfortunately we don't have time to create this entire scene here, but we are going to finish up with a result similar to this. And I think you can see that by following these steps, you'll be able to create truly realistic trees inside of Blender. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to go to front view and orthographic mode. And then right here in the center of my scene, I'm just going to press Shift A and add in single vert, add single vert. I'm going to extrude up. Start extruding this vertice up to create something that looks like a tree trunk. Now it'll be very flat, very two-dimensional, very stick figure-like, but that's okay because we're going to add a skin modifier to add thickness to this. So you can make it however tall you want, just something that has some random variation and shape. Okay, now I'm going to come down here and enable proportional editing, and you can see from the side it's completely flat. So I want to just break this up. So I'm going to grab a vertice, press G, and if I spin my middle mouse wheel, I can increase or decrease my circle of influence here, and we can just kind of move this around in ways that breaks up this sort of flatness. So it's kind of a curvy, fluid little mess there. Okay, now basically we're just going to keep repeating this process to create branches. So I'm going to start right around here, just kind of start extruding off some branches. And this is what's great about using this method. You have complete control over where the branches go, how many branches you have, you know, how many sort of break off from the individual branches. You control the entire look of the tree. So if you want kind of a sparse tree, you know, you might just stop there and call it good. If you want a really full, you know, generic style deciduous tree, then you would just kind of create a lot of full branches coming off, starting pretty low and then kind of working your way up. And that's kind of what I'm going for, just kind of a generic tree shape, something that looks just like any tree you would see every day. Now you do want to make sure that you look at it from all angles and sort of break up just that straight line look. And you want to make sure that your tree has some, just it kind of looks full from every angle. And yeah, it's just a matter of extruding branches out. Once you get some of the base branches, you can kind of go back and extrude some smaller ones just to add more detail. So I'll do that, extrude like so. And then you just repeat this process. I'm going to delete this lamp because it's in my way. You just delete this, you just repeat this process until you have something that looks like the shape that you want. And you have to sort of imagine it as three-dimensional at this point. Obviously it's just sort of a stick figure. But you know, you can kind of imagine if this were a big sturdy tree. You know, I might make my trunk a little bigger here. There we go. And just keep extruding little branches out. So you get the idea. Just proportional editing enabled really solves a lot of our problems if we just extrude out, make sure it's different from all different angles, and yeah, I think you get the idea. Just want to make sure your tree is full and lush looking with branches. Okay, so that's my shape, and hopefully you have yours where you want it. You can see it's kind of, you know, obviously it looks sparse because it's just a stick figure right now, but I have a good amount of character, a good amount of small detail with my larger branches, and that's exactly what we want. I might extrude a little, kind of get a little fancy here, just kind of add some thickness right in there. There we go. And yeah, and it's just all about making it look random and yeah, making it look organic. And that's something I really found that the tree add-on No matter how much you tweaked the settings, I just kind of always got results that looked like they were computer generated. And this method, taking a little extra time to model the branches, you get way better results. So that's why we're doing that. Alrighty, so now with all of that complete, I'm going to add a skin modifier to this. So let's come over here to the modifiers panel and add modifier, add skin modifier. And there we go. You can see it basically wrapped a cube around that vertice. So everywhere we had that line, it wrapped a mesh around it. This is extremely useful for adding thickness, especially on fluid shapes like this, where you know, you wouldn't necessarily extrude a cube out in all those directions. You wouldn't get the same smooth result. So obviously this is all too thick. So if I go to transparency mode, I can press A, select all those vertices, and then we're going to use shortcut key Control A and scale in until we get kind of something that, you know, the branch width that we want. Okay, and this is great because now we can adjust individual widths, and we can kind of tweak our branches on the fly. So I see kind of a weird sharp angle right here. I'm going to decrease my circle of influence and just move that branch over, smooth it out a bit. Okay, now I'm going to grab a point here near the bottom. I want kind of some more geometry in the base of my tree. So I'm going to grab this vertice and extrude down, and I'm going to press Control A, increase my circle of influence, and just drag this out till sort of the bottom of my tree and all the bottom branches here have some greater thickness. And you know, you can go crazy with it. You can really make your tree have a big base there at the bottom. I'm just gonna kind of, you know, I don't want my tree to be huge, so somewhere right around here, that's pretty good. And you can see using proportional editing, we get really realistic results where the branches near the base are bigger than the other ones up here, and that's exactly what we want. Now we can further emphasize this by selecting this point, maybe where this joint is. And I can press Control A and kind of increase or decrease that joint there. And you might see some distortion going on here where some of these vertices are bunching up. And that's just a result of the skin modifier. But what's great is you can just kind of press G to grab and move those vertices around until you get rid of that distortion. Or you can increase or decrease the scale as well, which I think that was the problem in that case. There we go. Takes care of that. And now it's just a matter of tweaking the scaling of all these branches. So you want to find the tips of the branches, of every branch pretty much. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and right click on all these points here. Oop. I'll go to, wireframe mode, and just select, I'll try to find all these points. I might not be able to get them all, but you know, do your best. Select the very ends of each of these branches, because obviously they wouldn't just, you know, stay the same thickness as the rest of the tree. And collectively what we can do is press Control A and just scale in, and that scales in those branches to make the tips of those pretty small. And that just looks more realistic how actual tree branches work. Okay, and now, like I said, it's just a matter of tweaking on the fly these branches. You want to make sure you don't have any sort of sharp elbows there. Obviously we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier that'll take care of a lot of these sharp places, but you want to do the best you can before we apply the screw modifier, and it's kind of too late at that point. You also want to just sort of, you know, make this tree have character. So I might pull the thickness out on this joint, Control A, create some more thickness there. Maybe on some of these branches, on some of the tips, I'm going to make it extra small, so Control A to scale in. And you know, it's just all about adding character to your tree, depending on what your tree, what you're using it for. If it's a close-up situation, you might want to spend more time extruding more branches out. If it's, you know, something that's just going to be in the background, you might get away with less branches and less detail. So you know, it's up to you. How much time you put into this part is really you know, how much you're going to get out of it. I suppose, as with anything else in Blender, or really just artwork in general. Okay, now honestly I think that's looking pretty good. I might just grab some of these vertices, add a little bit of character around here, have my trunk twisting a little bit there, and obviously everything is very boxy, very square, and we're going to change all of that. So this is what's really fun about this screw modifier. You can really get really cool results on the fly, and I just really love it. It ends up being a lot more customizable than even the tree add-on, in my opinion. I know some people will disagree with that because some people really love the sapling tree add-on. But like I said, I just found that I wasn't getting realistic results, and this method just seems to work really well. Okay, so I'm going to call that good. I'm not going to put too much more time into the modeling of our tree. I think that's pretty good. So what I'm going to do is apply a material to this tree so we can get into the leaves. Obviously, to apply a material, we need a good light source. So I'm going to press Shift A, add in a sun. Just move this over to the side and give this some nice backlight. Right about there. That's good. And I want to apply the scale of the tree, so Control A, scale. And I'm going to give this sun, let's give this a strength of 4 and a size of 0.2. So fairly small, so we can get some nice sharp shadows in there. I'll also position my camera so that it's facing our tree. Should be a great idea. And since our tree is tall, I'm going to change our aspect ratio. So I'm going to come to our render settings, and I'm just going to flip these. So I'm going to do 1080 by 1920. Get a nice tall aspect ratio going there, and just pull out a bit. There we go. Now I'll be able to get some test renders in, which will be great. All right, now let's set up the samples first of all. So I'm going to go underneath sampling. Let's do a render of 500 and a preview of 100. And that'll just give us a good idea of where our tree is going. All right, so now we can finally add a material, but first we need to apply the screw modifier. So make sure that your tree is how you like it, because it's going to be a lot harder to edit the tree once you've applied the screw modifier. So I'm going to just apply that and hit smooth shading. You can see already it's looking a lot better, and obviously it's still a great bit boxy. So we need to add a subdivision surface to that. So I'm going to add modifier subdivision surface. Take that up to a value of 2 for now. That'll be good. And I want to delete this bottom face. So I'm just going to orbit underneath here. Go to face select mode. Grab that face right there. Press X and delete face. It just makes that look a little more realistic. And you can clean up these edge loops. I might press Option, right click, and then edge slide. You can do that by pressing Control E and edge slide. Where are you? Just kind of slide that down, make that a little more even. And yeah, obviously you don't have to do that, but any final tweaking, I probably should have done this with the screw modifier like I told you to do. But I just noticed I want this to kind of bend a little, just to give it more character. You want your tree to have character. A characterless tree is a boring tree. Alright, so now let's finally add a material. I'm going to add new material. We'll call this tree bark. And let's give it, underneath settings, let's give this a viewport color, a nice brown. And we're going to use an image texture for this. So I'm going to select next to color, image texture, and open an image texture. And we're going to use one of my textures from blenderbranch.com. It says bark texture. If you download it, it comes with displacement, normal map, occlusion, and specularity. And we're going to use a couple of these. So you'll want to just download that. The link will be in the description of this video. and it'll also just be on blenderbranch.com, and it's free, as well as all my textures on there, so download away. Okay, so I've loaded that in. Now we need to UV unwrap our tree. Now you could take the time to create seams and manually unwrap this tree. I just split my window here, and I'm going to change this to the UV image editor. Sorry, sometimes I forget to say what I'm doing. You could manually create seams and try to unwrap this bad boy, but if you look at it in edit mode, it's basically just one giant cube because we haven't applied the subdivision surface modifier, so it's still kind of basically a cube. You could do some retopology to get rid of some of these triangles in here, but for the most part, if we just press U and cube projection, you can see we get this mess over here, and it just treats everything like a cube. So I found, it may not be the best way to unwrap that tree, but it works, because if we load in our bark texture here, and let's just go ahead and hit assign, and now I'm going to go to test render to just see what we've done here. Let's zoom in. You can see it really mapped that bark texture pretty well over the whole thing. Now, you're going to see some noticeable distortion in the branches, but the important thing is that the base of the tree looks good. And really it does. Can't complain. So I'm going to call that good. Successful UV unwrapping. Good job. All right. Now, let's get rid of that window. We don't need that anymore. Our backlight is working nicely for our scene. Let's get kind of some fill light in here so we can see the front of our tree. So I'm going to grab this sun, Shift D, move it to the front, kind of to the side, rotate it around. I'm going to set this to a size of 2 and a strength of 1, just to get some nice fill light in our scene. And if we just look through this test render, there we can now see what's actually going on with our material, and our tree is looking wonderful. Alright, now you want to take this time to save. Alright, now to complete the material of this tree, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to create a render box around the base, so Shift B inside the camera, render box right there, and I'm going to drag my timeline up, and we'll change this to the node editor. So I'm just trying to see what my trunk looks like here. I'll go Shift and Z. Okay, now I think I want to increase the scale of my bark. So an easy way to do that is to press Shift A, add in an input texture coordinate node, Shift A mapping, drop that in, take the UV output into the mapping and vector into the vector. And let's just increase the scale of the X, Y, and Z. Let's go 2. And yeah, and that helps a lot with hiding some of the mess up in our UV unwrapping job. That's good coffee. Okay. Moving on. We need a normal map in here, so I'm going to duplicate this image texture. And like I said, if you've downloaded my texture, all my textures come with a normal, specularity, occlusion. So I'm going to grab this normal map, it's the purpley one here, and just open that image. Now I'm going to take the vector output into the vector of the normal, and I'm going to press Shift A, go to vector normal map. So we need a converter to convert this image, this purpley image, into a normal map. We want to set it from color to non-color data. Take the color into the color, and the normal into the normal of the diffuse. Now you can see a bunch of bumps and ridges. If we crank this up, you can kind of see it more. That's all the way up to 10, and there's not a ton of detail. So I'm going to leave it at 2, which is normally very strong for normal maps. But because I want to see that bark pop, and we're not really using any sort of displacement, I'm going to leave that at 2. Okay, now we need some glossiness, so I'm going to go Shift A, shader, mix shader, drop that in. And then shader glossy, drop that in. You can see currently the entire part of the tree is now glossy. So we need a way to determine which parts are glossy and which parts don't, or don't reflect light, I should say. And we can do that by adding in a specularity map. So I'm going to duplicate the image texture again, same story, make it share the same scale, and just open up this folder and grab the specularity map, which is this black and white one. And the white parts basically tell Blender where to reflect light, and the black parts tell it to diffuse the light. So we're going to open that and take the color output of that specularity map into the fact of that mix shader. And now we get way more realistic glossiness coming off of that branch. Now it's still a little too much, so I want to dial that back. We can do that by adding in a converter color ramp node and plugging that in between that specularity map and just pulling these handles together a bit. And I might also just grab this white color and turn it down just so there's less glossiness. You want a little bit of glossiness because nothing in the real world is 100% diffused. Everything has a little bit of glossiness. Little tidbit there. Okay, so we also want the glossy node to have some normal mapping. So let's take the normal output of that, and boom, our bark texture is coming along quite nicely. Now, let's see. A couple other things. What else can we do? I want to desaturate this bark texture a bit. So I'm going to go Shift A, color, hue saturation, in between the color and the diffuse. And let's just desaturate it to a value of 0.8, and let's take the value of this down also. So I want kind of a darker bark. There we go. That looks great. All right. Now, another thing we need to do, you can leave it at the bark texture and just call that good if you'd like, but you get way more realistic results if we mix another image texture with this. So let me grab this sun here. I'm going to add some light in our scene. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to add some moss. So I've just downloaded a moss texture from cgtextures.com, and I'll have the link of that in the description of this video. And basically, I just want to add moss kind of to the entire tree, give a nice green effect, make it look like this tree has life in it. So the way we do that is after our image texture, so essentially this hue saturation goes with this image texture. So you want to make sure you go after both of these. And before the diffuse, we're going to add in a color mix RGB node and drop that in. And now we're going to press Shift A, add in texture, image texture. And we're just going to open wherever you've downloaded that moss texture, if you've downloaded it. And where did I put it? Here we go, moss, right there. And open image. Okay, now I'm going to put the color of this into the color of that mix RGB into the bottom. So you can see currently it's trying to mix the moss texture with the bark texture. Now I'm going to kind of break this up a bit by having this be determined by a noise texture. Throwing out the word texture a lot. I'm sorry. Hopefully you're following this. So the way we do this, Shift A, texture, noise texture. Drop that in. Let me save it. And I'm going to set the scale of this to 6 and the factor into the vector of that. And you can see we get some wild results here. That's not where we want to put the factor. We want to put the factor into the mix of that RGB. So now this becomes which parts of this texture have moss and which parts don't. I'm going to crank the detail all the way up to 16. Now, you might notice that didn't really change a whole lot. Well, that's because it's set to mix, which is still kind of a flimsy mixing method. We need to kind of increase the contrast. That's the word I'm looking for. And we can do that by adding in a color ramp in between the moss image texture and the mix RGB. So let's go converter, color ramp. I'm sorry. I'm getting this all wrong. Not in between there, in between the noise texture and the mix RGB. So we're affecting the factor, this input right here, we're affecting that by this color ramp. So if I pull these handles together, there you can see the effect I'm trying to explain. The more white we have, the more our moss is kind of strong and heavy in there. And then, vice versa, the more black you have in there, the less moss there is. So also you get different results if you adjust this scale. So if I set that to 12, you get totally moss in totally different areas. Set it really high. 22, you get kind of patchy moss, which that looks kind of good actually. Kind of like that. I might leave it at 22. Pretty good value. Okay, and now obviously you want this to just kind of accent your tree, so you don't want too much. Maybe you do. If you want a moss heavy tree, you know, be my guest. Totally up to you. So I'm gonna leave it somewhere right about there. That's pretty good. I also want the moss to be a little bit smaller, so I'm just gonna have it share the same scaling that everything else is sharing. So I'm going to take the vector of my mapping into the vector of that moss texture. And that makes that moss texture scaled up a bit. And now that's pretty much it. We have a pretty realistic tree, complete with moss. And there's no sign of the repeating bark texture. When you add a little bit of moss on there, a little bit of life, makes it look awesome. Okay, wonderful. Now, I do want to increase my subdivision surface just to see a little more realistic result there. Yeah, that looks a lot nicer. There was kind of a weird line there. Now, another thing you can do, certainly don't have to, but if we take the color output of this moss texture and take it, or actually, let's do the color output of the color ramp, and take it into the displacement of the material. Now that moss will have a little bit of bumping. It'll be subtle, but it'll be, you know, more realistic than just having the flat moss on there. So that's how I get kind of the moss to look like it's actually growing on the bark. So that's great. Alrighty, so now the tree is really, the base material of the tree is done. You can see how that looks, looking really quite realistic. It would look good in a close-up situation and looks excellent from far away. Okay, so that's our tree material done and dusted. Now, let's move on to the actual branches and the leaves, the part that you know, makes it look realistic. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to top view, and let's hide everything. So I'm going to press H, hide everything. I'm going to come over here, kind of the side, and add in another vertice, or single vert, I should say. And we're going to basically do the exact same thing that we just did, only this time on a much smaller scale. I'm just going to extrude, or make sure you have vertice selection mode. I'm just going to extrude my vertice selected. Basically, just kind of like that. 3 points. I'm going to have one come off here, one come off there. Wonderful. Now I'm going to, whoa, that was way up in the air. I thought that was way down at the grid floor. Oh well. Now I'm going to, with proportional editing enabled, just kind of tweak the shape of this. Make sure it has some character. There's only so much you can do. Very low poly little branch there. Okay, great. Now, same story. I'm going to, let's extrude kind of a stem out like so. I'm going to add a skin modifier. Smooth shading. I'm going to select all these points right here, Control A, and scale in. Basically, we're making a little twig. Okay? And I might grab these points and Control A, scale in. Like so. Now I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, and move that over to the side. And we'll come back to that later on. For now, let's focus on this branch. So this is our branch that we're going to add some leaves to. So we need a leaf. And to do that, I'm going to use an add-on, Shift A, import images as planes. If you don't have that, go to your user preferences, type in planes. You should see it right there. Great add-on. Saves us some time with our leaf texture. So I'm going to add that import image as planes. I'm going to load in a leaf texture that I got from cgtextures.com, and we'll use this leaf right here. And you want to make sure with this add-on that over here on the left hand side, before you check import, you check diffuse and transparent and use alpha. And because this leaf has a alpha background, Blender is going to automatically take care of that for us, which is great. Saves us a step. So now we have this leaf right here, and if we just check the material of it, you can see the stem isn't quite at the bottom of the mesh where we want it. So let's go ahead and subdivide this leaf. I'm going to press W, subdivide, and I'm just going to split this UV image editor, and let's load in that leaf like so. And now we can just sort of adjust the scale of this and move it so that the very center vertice here is at the very bottom of the leaf, like so. And that just helps because it'll just help when we put the leaf to the stem. And that's perfect. Okay, enough of that. Now I'm going to kind of randomize the geometry of this leaf a bit. So I have, what's the deal with, my cursor was way up in the air. I apologize. I'm going to have proportional editing enabled and just kind of bend up the sides of this leaf. You know, just making a random shape, making it sort of appear less two-dimensional. Okay, that's great. Now I'm just going to hit smooth shading. Alrighty. Now with that done, I want to set the origin of the geometry to the very base where this stem was. So we want to be able to rotate right around the base of the stem. So to do that, press Shift S, cursor to selected, tab into object mode, and up here on the left hand side in this tab, if you press T, bring that up, set origin to 3D cursor. Now we can rotate this leaf like so, which is awesome. Okay, now we want to put this leaf on this stem, and this is really easy, nothing complicated about it. Basically what we can do is grab some points on this object. So I'm going to select this vertice here, press Shift S, cursor to selected, so now my cursor is at that point. And if I select this leaf by right clicking and press Shift S, I can select selection to cursor, and I'll snap that leaf to the origin was set at the center. Okay, make sure cursor to selected, origin to 3D cursor. Okay, there we go. The origin's back where it needs to be. Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift S, selection to cursor. There we go. Alright, that's how it's supposed to work. So now we have a leaf on this twig here. And we're just going to kind of repeat this process till we have 3 or 4 leaves. Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift D, and then Shift S, selection to cursor. Like so. A lot of repetition with anytime you do nature, tends to just be a lot of repetition. You want to rotate these leaves around till they look, you know, nature-like. I might see if I can add one right here. Maybe scale it down a bit. Might be the problem. You want to just kind of look like a natural twig with leaves. You can check this material mode. Oh, hello. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Might rotate these around. Yeah, not bad. That's a pretty good twig if I do say so myself. Alrighty. Now, obviously we need to adjust the material. So let's add a material to this twig. I'm going to add new material. And let's just choose kind of just a brown, simple brown image or color. It's not going to be really seen at all, so we can get away with just not doing a whole lot. And I also want to adjust the leaf texture. So I need some light in my scene to do that. So I'm going to come up here, grab my two suns, my two light sources, and unhide those. Darken that twig branch. There we go. Alright, so let's grab this leaf material. And I'm going to go into the node editor. And here we have the add-on worked wonderfully. It put a transparent node in there with the mix shader. And yeah, that's working great. I'm going to rearrange these nodes. You can do the same to make it to match what I have going on here. You want to make sure the transparent is very last. And I'm going to duplicate this mix shader twice. Shift D, Shift D. Okay. And I'm going to unplug that alpha because that's not where we need it to be. And I'm also going to move that mix shader around. Let's see. I think that's how we want it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So lastly, I have the mix shader. The transparent needs to be on top, and these other two mix shaders plugged in like so. You don't have to worry about the alpha for now. It just kind of gets in the way. All right, so I'm going to add in shader glossy, because obviously leaves are glossy, and shader translucent. And let's plug these up. Translucent, you want our leaves to be translucent, and you want them to be glossy. Now you don't want too much translucency and too much glossiness. So I'm going to set the glossy to 0.1, and the translucency to 0.15. So now they let light through, but not a ton. I'm going to take the color output of the diffuse into the color of that translucent. So they let light through without sacrificing the color. Okay, and that's great. And now I'm going to take the alpha of the image texture into the factor of the very last one to be the factor of the transparent. So now our leaf has some good transparency. Now I want there to also be some bumps and ridges. So you could create a normal map or your own displacement map. But really I've found that if you just take the color output of the image texture straight into the displacement, you get plenty of bumps and ridges that look great. Now I'm going to turn this down a bit by adding a converter math node. Set that to multiply and just take that down to about a 0.2. So now that leaf is looking just fine. I might turn the roughness of the glossy down to 0.1. So there's a little less roughness. Actually, let's go 0.15. Okay. Wonderful. Now, currently, the color is all just one color. So we need a way to randomize the color every time this object is duplicated. So this is really easy to do. Basically, hopefully this isn't a confusing setup here. Basically, I'm going to be working in between the image texture and the diffuse. I'm going to add a color hue saturation node right there. And if we adjust this hue, you can see we get different colors, obviously. But we need a way to randomize the hue value. And we can do this by adding in a, input object info node. Take the random output into the hue. And now it randomizes that hue value between 0 and 1, and it gives each leaf a different random color. Now, we need a way to sort of dial in which parts of the hue spectrum. We don't want it to use 0 to 1. We want it to use more like 0.2 to 0.4. So how do we do this? Well, we can add in a converter math node and drop that in. Set this one to multiply and give that a value of about 0.2. So it's cutting hue value, which parts we can pick colors from. It's cutting that all the way down to 0.2 of the entire spectrum. And now let's add in another math node and set that to add. And we can give this a value about 0.4. And you can see now we've dialed in the hue spectrum that it's picking colors from. And you can see you go kind of more towards 0.2, you get more fallish like colors. We just leave that at 0.4, we get the green, different shades of green, which is really what we want. And I might desaturate it a bit on the hue saturation. 0.9 is good. So that's good. I'm sure we'll come back to tweak this leaf texture later on. We always kind of have to, depending on where your lighting is set up. One thing I'm not happy about is the material of this twig. You know, I'm just going to go ahead and apply, let's see, let's apply the skin modifier, first of all. And now let's do a simple UV unwrapping job. Let's go U, cube projection. And let's just grab this bark material, tree bark. I'm going to plus it and name it twig. So now we can adjust this material to be different from the bark and just hit assign. So now, if we press Shift Z, there we go. Our twig looks a little more realistic. Obviously, it's not going to be used in close-up situations, but you know, it looks better. Alrighty, excellent. So now that that's done, we're going to repeat all the same process. So we have to join all this geometry together. So I'm going to press B, create a box here, and press Control and J. And your materials will change. Your leaves will all be less randomized, but that's okay because when we duplicate this twig, that randomizer that we created will randomize the color of the leaves again. Okay, now we want the origin to be set at the base of this twig. So let's grab this bottom layer of vertices. I want that to be completely flat. So let's go S, Y, and 0. I don't want proportional editing enabled. S, Y, disable. Hello. There we go. Now the base of that is flat. And I'm going to press Shift S, cursor to selected. Boy, we've been doing a lot of that. And I'm going to go set origin to 3D cursor. So now we can rotate this twig around at the very base. And you probably guessed it, the reason why we duplicated this earlier is because we're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to scale this up. Control A might add some thickness. And I'm just going to add some more branches by extruding out. Like so, and randomize it a bit. Now you might be thinking this is a lot of work for just one tree, but once you kind of get the basics of this down, you can really kind of save the branches. If you save your models, save them in a folder, and the next time you do a tree, all you have to do is change the leaf type, adjust the branch settings a bit, and you're good to go. So you can really end up saving a lot of time, and really the results you get, I think they speak for themselves. You know, far more realistic in my opinion. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of scale this out, make it kind of a wider branch, like so. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did to the leaves. We're going to apply this to this twig. So I'm going to go grab this point right here, Shift S, cursor to selected. Grab this object, Shift D, Shift S, selection to cursor. And scale that down. And I'm going to do the same thing, Shift S, selection to cursor. Add another branch in there, like so. Wonderful. And we're just going to repeat this process. Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift D, Shift S, selection to cursor. Make sure you rotate your branches around and you get random, you know, just randomize it up, creating your own branch that looks unique. Alright, so when it's all said and done, you should have something that looks about like that. Now, we can check this, our materials. And yeah, you can see that looks like a very nice tree branch. Very realistic to the real world. This is something the tree add-on doesn't do. You don't have these smaller branches that split off into little twigs with the leaves coming off of. And that's really the difference. That's how trees look in real life. Examine any tree, you'll see this to be true. And this is what is going to separate your tree from the rest of the bunch. Now, obviously, we need to add a material. You can see our leaf shader worked wonderfully in randomizing that leaf color. We need to add a material to this base twig here. First, I think I might decrease the scale a bit, and then grab this point, kind of move it up a little. right about there. There we go. Now I'm going to apply the modifier to here. So apply the skin modifier. Make sure smooth shading is enabled. And now let's do the same thing. Just U cube projection and apply the twig material to that. There we go. Now if we press Shift Z, aha, a wonderful tree branch. Looks great. Excellent. Now this is what we're going to use to duplicate all over our tree. So let's join all the geometry. So I'm going to beat a box, join all of that, press Ctrl and J. And now materials, our leaf shader kind of de-randomized again, but once we duplicate this branch, it'll randomize, so don't worry about that. Let's grab this bottom layer vertices, SY0. That's already flat. Okay, wonderful. Let's set the origin to the bottom, cursor to selected, set origin to 3D cursor. Now we can rotate around the bottom. That's great. All right, now we are finally ready to bring our tree back. So I'm going to press Alt H, bring back our tree. Wonderful. And we need to set a particle system on this tree. So let's create a little render box here. With this tree selected, come up here to particle settings, select new particle system. Let's name this branches. And I'm going to set this to hair. We'll set the number to just 100 for now. We'll set the hair length to 2. And you can see currently it's emitting hair from all over the tree. Obviously we don't want that. We want branches just up here where our bigger branches are. So to do this, we need to create a vertex group. The easiest way to do that, you can see currently if I come over here to our vertex selection, we have no vertex groups. So let's go to weight paint mode with our tree selected, and you can hide our particles. There we go. And I'm going to just increase the radius and set my strength all the way to 1, weight all the way to 1, and just sort of paint wherever you want there to be branches on your tree. So I want obviously anywhere up here, basically almost everywhere except for the very base of the trunk. You can orbit around, making sure you have paint in all the right places. All the right paint and all the right... Alright, been making too many trees. Okay, that looks good. That's pretty on point. Alrighty, so now what we did, we created a vertex group from that weight paint. You can name that tree branch. Wonderful. And now let's just go back to object mode. So now if we come to our particle settings, let's unhide the hair. If we go to vertex groups, underneath density, you can see tree branch. Haha, that group that we created. So now it's limited to wherever we painted. Let's set the length also. Okay, and now we're going to check advanced. Set it to verts. And yeah, that's good. Okay, now let's go ahead and name. So here's our branch over here. Let's bring up the sidebar in, and let's name this branch. Okay, so now with our tree selected again, I apologize for all the moving around. With our tree selected, underneath our particle settings, if we come over here to object instead of path, we can choose our branch object, and now instead of hair, it will emit 100 of those branches. Haha, and that looks awesome. Okay, now we can increase or decrease the scale. I'm going to increase it. I'm going to go 0.08, increase the scale a bit. I'm going to set the random size to 0.2, so our branches have some random size. And you can do things like adjust the rotation. So let's check rotation, drop down menu, set this to normal, and you can changing the phase changes the rotation around the very base of the stem. This random value just changes the overall kind of left and right rotation, so you can get different results in that way. How much randomness you have, it's totally up to you. This is you know, just all to your taste, how many branches you want to be randomized and all of that. Really, there's plenty of randomization going on because we took the time to hand model the twigs and do all that, so the randomizer is going to be working just fine. I'm just going to go rendered mode just to kind of see how our leaves are going. Make sure our leaf material is looking good. And you can see the randomizer is working pretty well. Obviously our tree isn't in a scene right now, so it's hard to adjust the material. I think currently there's too much translucency and glossiness going on. Most likely that's where all that reflection is coming from. So let's adjust that leaf material. I'm going to select this branch. You want to make sure you still have that available. And go back into the node editor. And I see the problem. If we take the hue output of everything, of the color of our leaf texture, let's plug that into the glossy, and then we can crank up this factor value right here to 0.5. And then I also noticed the diffuse, we shouldn't have that plugged into the translucent. Let's just take the actual image texture and plug that into the translucent, and then we can crank this value up to 0.3. So my apologies for getting that mixed around. But I think once we make those changes, if we press Shift and Z, our leaf material should look a lot better. And it does. Okay, so that was the problem. Just missed one minor, actually major important step there. So you should have, your leaf should have the proper amount of glossiness and also translucency, but without sacrificing the color. And there we go. Those look great. Now you can play around with this, our randomizer that we created up here, to get different colors. Anyway, I'm going to leave this first one at 0.2 and the second one at 0.4, just to give some nice shades of green in there, and that's looking awesome. So that's it. With those changes made, our leaf shader is complete. So there, I'll just leave that. Hopefully you can sort of see what's going on. You want your leaf shader to look something like this in order to get the nice randomized leaf color with translucency and also glossiness. Alright, so that's the final step. Now we're ready to just increase the number of branches and do a render. So I'm going to grab my tree here and let's crank this up. I'm going to go 600. And obviously this is all to taste. You can do however many or how little you want. And I'll make my render box fill up my camera. I'm going to tweak some things. Oh, hello. I'm going to set my background color to kind of a closer to whitish. And you want to make sure your lighting is set up where you can get some nice light backlight on your tree. I'll come over to my render settings and set my samples at, let's go 300. And I'm just gonna hit render. Alright, so hopefully you see right off the bat a very convincing result, very realistic to the real world. We have our branches and they are splitting off into smaller branches that have little twigs with little leaves coming off, and the bigger branches have more character because we've hand modeled them and put them exactly where we want them. And you can use this method to shape any tree you like. In fact, I'd love to see the kind of trees that you guys create, and if you make something awesome out of this, I'd love to see it. You can email it to me, or better yet, just post it in the comments on blenderbranch.com below this video, and I'd love to see the different trees that you come up with. The possibilities are unexplored, especially when you take this technique and throw it into a scene with some HDR lighting and maybe a little bit of grass. You can see the results pop even further and look awesome. So that's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next Blender Branch tutorial.